The volcanic winds howled across the ash fields of Scartherax Prime as Commander Sarah Chen stepped carefully through the cooling lava rock. Her environmental suit beeped steadily, monitoring the toxic atmosphere that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. She was supposed to be collecting mineral samples, nothing more. The Terran Science Council had been clear about that. Then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in this dead landscape. A weak, pitiful cry that made her heart clench. Sarah turned toward the noise and froze. Huddled between two jagged rocks was a creature no bigger than a large dog. Its scales shimmered between deep red and gold, catching the light from the distant sun. Baby dragon. But something was wrong. The creature's left wing bent at an unnatural angle, twisted and malformed from birth. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside the hatchling. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing brilliant amber irises filled with pain and confusion. The little dragon tried to crawl toward her warmth but collapsed after moving just a few inches. Sarah's scanner confirmed what she feared. The hatchling was dying. Dehydration, starvation, and exposure were shutting down its small body. It had been here for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Abandoned. "Chin to Pathfinder," she spoke into her comm unit. "I need an emergency medical transport. I found something." "Commander, your mission parameters don't include," her pilot began. "Just do it, Marcus. Now." Within minutes, Sarah had the hatchling wrapped in thermal blankets aboard her shuttle. The creature was so weak it could barely lift its head. She gave it water through a dropper, watching as it drank desperately. Back on the Pathfinder, Sarah's crew gathered around the medical bay. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's physician, ran his scanner over the small dragon with a grim expression. "This deformity is genetic," Yuki said quietly. "The wing will never develop properly. In Earth animals we'd call this a birth defect. Can we help it?" Sarah asked, already knowing she wouldn't abandon this creature. "Maybe. But Commander, you know what this means. The dragons left it here deliberately." Sarah did know. She had studied dragon culture for 5 years. They were an ancient, proud species who valued strength above all else. Weak offspring were left in the ash fields to die. It was tradition, they said. Natural selection, they claimed. "That's murder," Sarah said flatly. "That's their culture," Marcus replied from the doorway. "We're not supposed to interfere." Sarah looked down at the baby dragon, who had fallen asleep in the warm blankets. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. One tiny claw had wrapped around her finger. "I don't care," she said. The dragon elders arrived at the Pathfinder within hours. 3 massive beings, each the size of a small spacecraft, their scales darkened with age and scarred from countless battles. They communicated through translators, their voices deep and resonant. "The defective one must be returned," Elder Vraction declared. "You have no authority over dragonkind, human." "He's dying," Sarah said, standing her ground despite feeling like an insect before these ancient creatures. "You left a baby to die alone in the ash. It is our way. The weak do not survive. This has kept our species strong for 1,000,000 years. He's not weak. He's just different." Sarah's voice shook with anger. "And I won't let him die because of your traditions. You dare defy the Draco Concordat?" Vraction's eyes blazed. "Yes, I dare." The dragons left with threats and warnings. Sarah knew she'd just created an interstellar incident. The Science Council would be furious. She might lose her commission. But as she sat beside the sleeping hatchling that night, gently stroking its warm scales, she felt no regret. "You need a name," she whispered. The hatchling's scales glowed faintly in the dim light, like dying embers. "Ember. I'll call you Ember. And I promise you, little one, you'll never be abandoned again." The baby dragon stirred, pressing closer to her warmth, and Sarah Chen made a choice that would change 2 species forever. 3 months had passed since Sarah smuggled Ember off Scartherax Prime. The Terran Science Council had suspended her, pending a full investigation. She sat now in a cold hearing room on Earth, facing 5 stern officials who held her career in their hands. "Commander Chin, you violated Protocol 7, Director Hammond said, his voice sharp. "Non-interference with alien cultural practices. Do you understand the diplomatic crisis you've created?" "I understand that I saved a child's life," Sarah replied calmly. "A dragon hatchling is not a human child. He's a sentient being capable of thought and emotion. That's enough for me." The council members whispered among themselves. Through the observation window, Sarah could see Ember in the adjacent room with Dr. Tanaka. The little dragon had grown. He was now the size of a large wolf, his scales brighter and healthier. The malformed wings still hung awkwardly, but Ember had learned to balance without it. "The dragons want him back," another council member said. "They say you've corrupted him with human influence." "They want to kill him," Sarah corrected. "Let's be honest about what return means." Director Hammond leaned forward. "What you did was emotional, not logical. We have treaties with the Draco Concordat, trade agreements, scientific partnerships. You've endangered all of it for one creature." Sarah stood up, her hands flat on the table. "Then our treaties aren't worth the paper they're written on. If we turn our backs on sentient beings in need just to protect trade routes, what does that make us?" Before Hammond could respond, alarms blared. The observation window exploded inward as Ember crashed through, glass scattering across the floor. The young dragon positioned himself between Sarah and the council, his small body trembling but his stance protective. "Ember, no!" Sarah shouted. "They want to take you away," Ember said, his voice high and clear. The translator implant Dr. Tanaka had installed worked perfectly. "I heard them. They want to send me back." The council members stared in shock. None of them had heard Ember speak before. "You can talk," Director Hammond whispered. "Sarah taught me," Ember said proudly, though his eyes remained wary. "She teaches me many things. Math, science, stories. She reads to me every night." He looked up at Sarah with absolute trust. "She's my mother." The room fell silent. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes as she placed her hand on Ember's head. "I won't let them separate us," Ember continued, addressing the council directly. "Sarah says family protects each other. That's what humans do. You're supposed to be good at that." Director Hammond removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Commander Chin, wait outside please. Take the hatchling with you." Sarah and Ember left together, his tail wrapped around her leg. In the hallway she knelt down and hugged him tightly. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did. You protected me. Now I protect you." Hours later the council recalled them. Director Hammond looked tired but his expression had softened slightly. "Against my better judgment, we're granting you temporary custody," he announced. "The public response to this case has been overwhelming. Millions of humans have sent messages supporting you. The dragons are furious, but we cannot, in good conscience, return a sentient being to certain death." Sarah felt relief flood through her. "However," Hammond continued, "you remain suspended. And Commander, understand this, the dragons will not forget. You've made powerful enemies." "I can live with that," Sarah said, her hand resting on Ember's head. Outside the council building, protesters had gathered. But they weren't angry. They were cheering. Signs read, "Save Ember," and "Family has no species." News drones hovered everywhere, broadcasting the moment Sarah and Ember emerged. Ember pressed close to her side, overwhelmed by the crowd. "Are all humans like you?" he asked quietly. Sarah smiled, watching people celebrate their victory. "The best of us try to be." That night, safely aboard the Pathfinder, Sarah read Ember a story about a boy who refused to abandon his friend. Ember fell asleep with his head in her lap, finally safe, finally home. 5 years had changed everything. Ember was no longer a small hatchling that could curl up in Sarah's lap. He now stood 8 feet tall, his red and gold scales gleaming like polished metal. The prosthetic wing that human engineers had built him hummed softly with each movement, allowing him limited flight for the first time in his life. But size and technology couldn't fix everything. "I don't belong anywhere," Ember said, staring at his reflection in the observation window of their small apartment on New Horizon Colony. "Dragons hate me. Humans see me as a pet project. What am I, Sarah?" Sarah looked up from her research terminal. These conversations had become more frequent as Ember grew older. "You're my son. That's what matters." "Your son who can breathe fire and has scales," Ember said bitterly. "I can't even eat normal food. I have to order special meals from the Dragon Quarter, and they spit in my food when they think I'm not looking." Before Sarah could respond, her comm unit buzzed urgently. Marcus's face appeared on the screen, his expression grave. "Sarah, you need to see this. Now." The news broadcast showed a Dragon Concordat official standing before the Galactic Council. His words were harsh and deliberate. "The human Sarah Chen has committed cultural genocide. She has stolen a dragon child and poisoned his mind with human weakness. The creature that calls itself Ember is an abomination. We demand his immediate return for proper termination." "Termination," Ember repeated quietly. "They still want me dead." Sarah felt cold anger spreading through her chest. "They can't have you. I won't let them." But the threats became real 3 days later. Sarah and Ember were walking through the market district when she noticed them. 3 young dragons, smaller than Ember but moving with coordinated purpose. Their scales bore the mark of the Purity Wing, a radical group that believed in absolute dragon supremacy. "Ember, run!" Sarah shouted. Fire erupted across the marketplace. Screams filled the air as people scattered. The assassins moved fast, cutting off escape routes. Ember pushed Sarah behind him, his prosthetic wing extending defensively. "Leave us alone!" Ember roared, his voice deeper and more draconic than Sarah had ever heard. "You're no dragon," the lead assassin hissed. "You're a human's toy. A disgrace to our ancestors." "I'm more dragon than you'll ever be," Ember snarled back. "You hide behind tradition because you're afraid of change." The fight was brutal and quick. Ember's human-taught combat techniques surprised the attackers. His prosthetic wing, made of titanium alloy, struck like a hammer. But he was outnumbered. Fire scorched his scales. Claws tore at his flesh. Security forces arrived just as Ember collapsed, bleeding. The assassins fled, vanishing into the crowds. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she checked his wounds. "I'm okay," Ember gasped. "Are you hurt?" "Forget about me. We need to get you to medical." But as they waited for the transport, Sarah realized something terrifying. This wouldn't be the last attempt. The dragons wanted Ember dead and they wouldn't stop trying. That night, after Ember was treated and resting, Marcus brought Sarah more bad news. The Draco Concordat is threatening to close all trade routes through their territory if humans continue to harbor Ember. That's 40% of our shipping lanes. The council is considering... Sarah, they're considering handing him over. Sarah's blood ran cold. "No. You might not have a choice." But Sarah Chin had never been good at accepting impossible situations. She spent the night researching, sending encrypted messages, following leads she discovered years ago about other abandoned dragons. By morning she had a plan. "Ember," she said gently, waking him, "how would you feel about meeting others like you? Dragons who were also abandoned but survived." Ember's eyes widened. "There are others?" "Yes. And they're hiding because they're afraid. But together maybe we can be strong enough to stop hiding." Ember stood, wincing at his bandaged wounds. "When do we leave?" "Tonight. We're officially becoming refugees." Sarah looked at her home one last time, then at her son. Some things were worth losing everything for. The underground network was smaller than Sarah had hoped. Only 17 abandoned dragons had survived, living in hidden caves and forgotten stations across the galaxy. Ember met them all, and for the first time in his life he didn't feel alone. But their refuge didn't last long. The news reached them 3 months later. A plague had struck the dragon homeworlds. It spread through their respiratory systems like wildfire, drowning them from the inside. Thousands were dying every day. The dragon healers, with all their ancient knowledge, couldn't stop it. Ember watched the broadcasts in silence, his expression unreadable. Sarah sat beside him, waiting. "They're dying," Ember finally said. "The ones who wanted me dead are dying." "Yes," Sarah said carefully. "I should feel happy. Or satisfied. Something." Ember's claws clenched. "But I just feel empty." "Is that wrong?" Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "It means you're better than they are." Dr. Tanaka burst into their shelter, his tablet glowing with data. "Ember, I need your help. I've been studying the plague patterns and something doesn't add up." Ember and Sarah followed him to the makeshift laboratory. Holographic images of the virus floated in the air, rotating slowly. "The plague targets adult dragons almost exclusively," Tanaka explained. "Hatchlings and adolescents have much higher survival rates." "But why?" "The dragon scientists can't figure it out." Ember studied the images, his head tilting. Sarah had taught him xenobiology for years, combining human scientific methods with his natural understanding of dragon physiology. Now he saw something the pure dragon or pure human scientists had missed. "It's the fire glands," Ember said suddenly. "Adult dragons breathe hotter fire. Their glands produce more catalyst enzymes. The virus is using those enzymes to replicate." Tanaka's eyes widened. "That's brilliant. If we can create an inhibitor that targets the catalyst without shutting down the fire glands completely, we could stop the virus from spreading," Sarah finished. "But we'd need access to dragon genetic databases. Detailed cellular maps. We'd need to go to Scartherax Prime," Ember said quietly. The silence was heavy. The dragon homeworld was the last place Ember would ever be welcome. "They'll kill you," Sarah said flatly. "Maybe. But I can't let them all die, Sarah. Not even them." Ember looked at his mother with ancient eyes. You taught me that compassion isn't something we give only to people who deserve it. It's something we give because of who we are, not who they are. Sarah felt pride and terror warring in her chest. I won't let you go alone. The message they sent to the Draco Concordat was simple. Ember offered his help in exchange for safe passage and access to their medical facilities. The response came from Elder Vraction himself, Ember's biological father. We do not need help from an abomination. But 3 days later, as the death toll climbed past 10,000, a different message arrived. It was encrypted, sent from an anonymous source. Come to the Northern Medical Facility at midnight. Doc 7. Come alone. The dragon who met them was young, her scales a deep purple. I am Cale Thorne, medical researcher. Many of us believe the old ways are killing us. Not just the plague, the old ways themselves. She looked at Ember with something like hope. Can you really help? I can try, Ember said. They worked for 72 hours straight. Ember's unique perspective, trained in both human science and dragon biology, let him see connections others missed. Sarah synthesized compounds using human technology that dragon equipment couldn't produce. Tanaka coordinated with Cale Thorne, bridging the gap between two completely different medical traditions. Finally they had it. A treatment that could stop the plague. We need to test it, Cale Thorne said nervously. But on who? If it fails? Test it on me, Ember said. He picked up a vial containing the live virus. Before anyone could stop him, he inhaled it. Ember, no. Sarah screamed. But Ember remained calm as the virus entered his system. They administered the treatment immediately. For 6 agonizing hours they waited and monitored. The virus died. Ember lived. It works, Cale Thorne whispered in awe. By the ancestors, it actually works. The cure spread across the dragon worlds within weeks. Millions of lives were saved. The plague that had threatened to destroy an entire species was stopped by the very dragon they had left to die and the human who refused to abandon him. Elder Vraction requested a private meeting. Sarah wanted to refuse, but Ember insisted on going. They met in a medical facility where hundreds of recovering dragons rested in treatment pods. Vraction looked smaller than Sarah remembered. Age and illness had dimmed his scales. His mate, Elder Sherilyn, stood beside him equally weakened. These were Ember's biological parents, the ones who had carried him to the ash fields and left him there. You saved us, Vraction said, his voice rough. The very one we condemned has become our salvation. Ember stood tall, his prosthetic wing gleaming. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was right. Sherilyn stepped forward, her eyes glistening. We were wrong. I have dreamed of you every night for 5 years. The sound of your cries in the ash. The way you looked at us before we turned away. I have been haunted by what we did. Good, Ember said coldly. You should be. Vraction bowed his head, a gesture of profound submission in dragon culture. We ask forgiveness we do not deserve. We threw away something precious because of pride and tradition. You became great not because of us but despite us. You're right, Ember said. You taught me what family isn't. She taught me what family is. He gestured to Sarah, who stood beside him with quiet pride. My name is Ember Chin. Chin is my family name. It's the only one that matters. Tears ran down Sherilyn's scaled face. May we at least know you? Not as parents, we lost that right. But as dragons who wish to learn from you? Ember was silent for a long moment. Sarah touched his shoulder gently, letting him know the choice was his. Perhaps, Ember finally said. But understand this, Sarah Chin is my mother. That will never change. The meeting ended quietly, but its effects rippled across dragon society like an earthquake. Young dragons began to speak out. Cale Thorne published research showing that genetic diversity, including what they called defects, actually strengthened the species. Other abandoned dragons emerged from hiding, their stories shocking the dragon worlds. The Council of Elders faced their greatest crisis in a million years. Their traditions had nearly destroyed them. Change was no longer optional, it was survival. 6 months later, Sarah and Ember stood before the Galactic Council. The dragons had requested they testify about cross-species cooperation. But more importantly, they were there to witness history. The Draco Concordat announced sweeping reforms. Abandoned hatchlings would be protected and cared for. Genetic differences would be studied, not punished. Dragon and human scientists would work together, combining ancient knowledge with innovative methods. This plague taught us a painful lesson, Cale Thorne announced, now promoted to Chief Medical Advisor. Strength comes not from perfection but from diversity. From compassion. from the courage to change. The human delegation erupted in applause. Even some dragons joined in, a gesture they had learned from humans. That evening, Sarah and Ember returned to their ship, now legally recognized as family across all civilized space. But they weren't alone. 3 young dragons waited at the docking bay, hatchlings recently abandoned, now rescued by the organization Sarah and Ember had founded. "Are these the new arrivals?" Ember asked gently, kneeling to their level. The smallest one, a pale blue hatchling with oversized ears, nodded nervously. "They said you would help us. They said you were abandoned too." "I was," Ember said softly. "But I found something better than the family that left me. I found the family that chose me." Sarah watched as Ember carefully gathered the frightened hatchlings, speaking to them in soothing tones, promising them safety and love. Her heart swelled with pride. "Ready to do this again?" she asked. Ember looked up at her and smiled. "Always. Someone has to show them that family isn't about blood or species. It's about who stands with you when the ash falls." Sarah Chin smiled back at her son, surrounded by new children who desperately needed hope. They had changed the galaxy by refusing to accept cruelty as tradition. And they were just getting started.